Welcome to this mental health webinar. My name's Douglas, and I'm here with a distinguished panel of lived experience experts and clinical experts and researchers in transcranial magnetic stimulation. And we're going to look at its role in difficult to treat depression. Andre, you could start to share the slides just now. After our quick introduction, I'm going to hand over to Paul Briley, who's going to give a very quick overview of the burden of difficult to treat depression. And then we'll hand over to Susan, who's going to talk about her patient's journey and why access to TMS matters. We've got a bit of a treat for you after that. We have a short video presentation by Tony Barker, who was the co-inventor of TMS back in the 1980s and has been tracking the evidence ever since. And then we're going to hand back to Paul, who's going to review the evidence on TMS safety, clinical effectiveness, and all of that. And then we'll just take a step back from the evidence and think about the patient experience again. Mark is going to talk about his experience of accessing TMS. And we're also going to hear from Rebecca, who has a different experience of TMS, but a very important one, I think you'll agree. So we'd like to then take that back out to thinking about the broader picture, the cost effectiveness of TMS. This is something in difficult to treat depression that has the potential to save money for the NHS, for the country, for individuals. So Richard's going to give us a quick overview of that. And then we're going to go over to Jake, who's been talking to the industry, the manufacturers of TMS devices, and he's going to give us a perspective on what the industry has been telling us about it. And then we want to bring us all together to think about what do we do now. And Mo is going to give an overview from his experience of building the business case in the NHS for TMS. And then we'll wrap up the formal part of presentations with Paul, who's going to talk about future developments in TMS. We'll then have some questions, and I'll want to give the last word to Matt, who also has lived experience of difficult to treat depression and TMS. And perhaps you could skip to the next slide, please, Andre. And just some housekeeping for everyone. We'd like to use the chat box. Use that to introduce yourself and ask any questions and also answer any questions. Please be polite and respectful at all times and be mindful this is a mixed audience. Although we're mostly NHS people, there are people from different backgrounds, different levels of knowledge. After the event, you'll receive a follow-up email with the slides and a link to further resources. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to talk about the burden of difficult to treat depression.
Thanks, Douglas. So I'm Paul Briley, psychiatrist and TMS researcher. So depression will affect 1 in 7 people at some point during their lifetime. It has a huge impact on people's ability to work, engage with their family, hobbies, social activities, all areas of life. Depression costs the UK economy £27 billion per year in lost productivity and healthcare costs, and it is the cause of nearly 3/4 of suicides, as well as raises the risk of death from poor physical health. Difficult to treat depression is depression that continues to cause significant burden for a patient despite trying first-line treatments, which might be an antidepressant medication, community talking therapies. 1 in 3 people with depression have difficult to treat depression, which corresponds to an enormous number, 2.5 million adults in the UK. Difficult to treat depression is more likely to be chronic. It has higher suicide rates. Patients are likely to have greater difficulties functioning day to day, poorer quality of life, and greater use of healthcare services. What we will show you today is that we have a clinically and cost-effective treatment option for many people with difficult to treat depression that was recommended by NICE for use in the NHS in 2015, over a decade ago, but is still not widely available. And this is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That's a brilliant snapshot of where we are and the problem that we face. I'd like to take it down to the individual. What does this mean for individuals' lives now? And hand over to Susan, who's going to talk about her experiences, her journey with TMS and why it matters.
So I have a history of 9 years treatment-resistant depression. I had multiple medications which never worked, multiple sessions in hospital, and I think I cost the NHS about £750,000 over that 9 years. I had ECT, which caused lots of memory problems, which are lifelong now. And I was never really very well. I got to the end of my journey with ECT and discovered TMS, which I could access privately via my husband's insurance. And I made a miraculous recovery, something that I'd never experienced before, a deep feeling of wellness, so much so that I was able to go back to work as a nurse now, and I can care for my patients and do a job that I really, really enjoy. Getting the TMS after my husband's insurance ran out, that was a challenge. I had to look into the board members' meetings and find out the commissioner's name and email. And I eventually found her name. I emailed her with not a great amount of success, but then my psychiatrist then took that on board and took it to the medical director, who said, yes, she should have it because she works for the NHS, so she will be an asset. And I then got it, and I've had it ever since, and that was in 2024. And I really shouldn't still be having it, but we're just keeping quiet. But it keeps me well. I reckon it costs me about £6 a day. I have it privately, but it's funded by the NHS. But it shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't have had to make such a big deal. And I was a pain to the board members, to the chief executive, who incidentally didn't reply to me, which was so frustrating because I was so well. And I'm now in a position where I enjoy life, and I felt so incensed. That's why I did reach out to see if there was somebody who could help me pursue a journey of good health for the remainder of their days too.
Thank you so much, Susan. That's a really moving and comprehensive account that you've given us there. Really appreciate all our lived experience contributors to sharing what's happened to them and trying to access TMS.
You're
So
welcome.
I think that sets the sort of agenda of where we're at a little bit. And we're going to take a little bit of a break. And I want to thank people for introducing themselves in the comments and acknowledging people's contributions. But what I'm going to do now is share a recorded presentation with Tony Barker, who is the co-inventor of TMS. And I think hopefully this will be new for everyone. So sit back and enjoy Tony Barker's account of how TMS came to be.
Barker. In my brief talk about TMS today, I want to cover 5 areas. I want to start by describing the invention of TMS in Sheffield and the basic principles that underpin the technique. And then I want to go on to describe how it became commercially available. I'd like to describe the types of signals that are induced in the brain by TMS and look at its advantages as a brain stimulation tool. Finally, I'd like to try and answer the question, how widespread is TMS today? TMS was invented in Sheffield in 1985, following a 10-year curiosity-driven research project to investigate the stimulation of nerves using large magnetic field pulses. But why magnetic fields? Because in 1831, Michael Faraday discovered that time variation
disappeared again, Douglas.
And of course, the purpose of the body's nervous system is to respond to and to transmit electrical signals. So we reasoned that we should be able to stimulate peripheral nerves using large pulses of magnetic field. And we achieved this in 1982 after some 8 years of research. But we were still curious about the properties of magnetic stimulation, and we continued to make bigger and better stimulators. And then in late 1984, I had what I guess you would call today a light bulb moment. I suddenly realized that our magnetic field pulses should pass through the skull and electrically stimulate the brain, both painlessly and non-invasively. And it worked the first time we tried it. And a new window into the brain had been opened. And here's a picture I've only shown a couple of times before. It is actually the first ever photograph taken of TMS in use. So here's the Sheffield team. On the left, Dr. Reza Jalinous, then a PhD student. In the center, Professor Ian Freeston, my long-term mentor and friend, who I've had the privilege of knowing for well over half a century. And myself on the right, when I had more hair and my beard wasn't as white as it is today. We published the first description of TMS in The Lancet, and it caused considerable worldwide interest and lots of requests for stimulators. This presented us with something of a problem because at the time we had the only bit of kit in the world that could do TMS. After some debate, we decided to use the entire resources of my little NHS laboratory for a whole year to make 6 stimulators to a new design more suitable for clinical use. And we gave them to groups in the UK and the USA for just the cost of the components. But demand continued to grow, and we soon realized we could not supply the whole world with stimulators from my little NHS laboratory. We made a conscious decision not to patent TMS, but instead introduced a number of manufacturers to it because we wanted to encourage its widespread adoption. And with hindsight, that was probably a good decision because now there are stimulators available from manufacturers all over the world. These are just a few examples from around the world. TMS is delivered to the patient using a stimulating coil. The most commonly used coil shape is figure of 8, and it stimulates a brain area somewhat larger than the size of a teaspoon. And here's 2 computer modeling examples to show that. On the left, a very simple brain model, and the yellow patch in the middle of the figure of 8 shows the electrical excitation area. And on the right, in a more realistic model, you can see the electric fields induced on the surface of a realistic brain model. Why is TMS so useful? Electrical stimulation of the brain with short pulses is difficult and jolly painful. I know, I've tried it to myself, because the skull gets in the way. Electricity does not easily pass through bone. But the magnetic fields from TMS pass through the skull completely unimpeded. It is not an obstacle to magnetic fields at all. This allows the brain to then be electrically stimulated by the currents created by the pulsed magnetic field. Unlike other brain stimulation techniques, these short electrical pulses are very similar to those already used naturally by the brain, and hence, arguably, these signals appear quite natural to it. The therapeutic effect of TMS is thought to be due, at least in part, to it enhancing the plasticity of synapses by repeatedly stimulating them. So how widespread has TMS become? Well, there's a new clinical and scientific journal devoted specifically to TMS studies. The Clinical TMS Society has over 1,000 members with clinics all over the world. Each of these little markers is one or more clinics run by a TMS Society clinician, primarily, but not always, being used to treat things like depression. And over 700 clinicians and scientists attended its 2026 annual meeting in Boston. But here's the picture that surprises me most. This is the graph of the number of papers that have been written about TMS. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, in 1985, there was one paper, our paper in The Lancet. Since then, the literature has grown quite remarkably. And by the end of 2025, over 26,000 papers had been published about TMS. And they were coming out during 2025 at a rate of some 40 papers every week. Quite extraordinary. Although perhaps the best evidence that TMS is increasingly widespread is that there's even a Lego kit available to make your own figure of 8 coil. And even ChatGPT knows about TMS. This is its response when a few days ago I asked it to make a cartoon about TMS for depression. And I would commend this image to you. It's quite aesthetically pleasing. It's technically fairly accurate, and it shows in a single picture quite a lot about how TMS works. To end, if I may, on a personal note, I think now is the time for the UK in general and the NHS in particular to embrace this British invention, TMS. It is widely used elsewhere in the world. It can benefit tens of thousands of patients, perhaps many more than that. And yet it is hardly used at all here in the UK. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, it's quite a presentation by Tony. We're very grateful to him for recording that, and it's people picking up on the irony of the situation, the technology that was invented in the UK that isn't very widely available here. So let's move on now to look into some of the details of what the evidence says about TMS. And so I'm going to hand back to Paul at this point. And Paul, I wonder if you could talk us through the evidence on safety and clinical effectiveness.
Yes, thank you. And just to recap, for depression, TMS is usually given across 20 to 30 short treatment sessions, typically once per day for several weeks, but newer approaches give multiple sessions per day to speed this up. Each treatment session can be as short as 3 to 10 minutes nowadays, and a patient has the treatment whilst awake, sitting in a comfortable chair, can chat to the clinicians and go home straight afterwards. So thinking about the effectiveness and safety of TMS for treating depression. TMS is not a new or experimental treatment, as Tony's shown. It is one of the most highly studied treatments for depression. When NICE recommended TMS for treating depression in the UK NHS in 2015, it based this recommendation on 4 systematic reviews, the largest of which brought together findings from 32 randomized controlled trials that compared active TMS to inactive TMS, that is sham or placebo TMS. These trials included a total of 1,600 people with depression. By 2019, there were 63 sham-controlled trials, including 3,000 patients in total, plus a further 16 trials of TMS going head-to-head with other treatments, again showing TMS is effective for depression. The review shown here in the figure compared TMS and ECT, a type of treatment that works for people with severe life-threatening depression but is much more invasive. The review shows strong benefit from commonly used TMS approaches. Next slide, please. A 2022 and a 2024 review showed that 2 types of TMS more than doubled a patient's chances of their depression symptoms halving, what we call response, and of their depression going away completely, remission, compared to sham or placebo treatment. A US study looked at data from an extra 4,000 patients who received TMS outside of clinical trials. With at least 20 sessions of TMS treatment, a third of patients showed remission, a further third showed response. This 2024 study in the figure brought together data from a range of trials of all sorts of treatments for depression, including medication treatment options, and showed that TMS ranked better than all of them apart from ECT. Next slide, please. In terms of safety of TMS, there are a few things to think about. TMS uses magnetic fields, so some people cannot have it. Restrictions are similar to an MRI brain scan, but with TMS the magnetic fields are much more focal, so the key thing is avoiding magnetic metal or electronics near the treatment coil. TMS makes a loud click when it delivers a pulse, so patients and clinicians should wear ear protection too. There is a small risk of syncope, fainting, particularly in people who have previously experienced fainting, for example whilst having a blood test. There is a small risk of seizures as TMS briefly stimulates the brain. The risk of seizures is rare with TMS, less than 1 in 10,000, and clinics all have procedures to manage these if they were to occur. Not everyone improves with TMS, but few people get worse. It can push mood too high in people with bipolar disorder, but both these risks appear small compared to other treatments for depression. More commonly, people experience mild side effects during treatment, such as discomfort on their scalp during the TMS but not after. The pulses can sometimes stimulate muscles of the face, again during but not after TMS. Sometimes people can have a mild headache that settles down over a short period. This can be compared to other treatments where side effects may be felt throughout the entire day. Next slide. Whilst TMS was shown to be effective some time ago now, the field hasn't stood still. Researchers have looked at ways to speed up TMS and make it more effective. One TMS treatment used to last 40 minutes. Now people commonly use a 3 to 10 minute treatment protocol that is just as effective. You can deliver multiple treatment sessions per day. This is commonly called accelerated TMS, allowing you to have more treatments in a shorter span of time. And our own UK Bright Mind trial, including patients from Nottingham, Northampton, Newcastle, London and Manchester, showed that patients that get better with TMS can stay well for 6 months or longer. Some people need no further treatments, others could have top-up TMS or other types of depression treatment to help them stay well. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. That's a brilliant overview of what is a very compelling argument. And I think in 30 years of working in evidence-based healthcare, I'm not sure I've seen a stronger case for a technology that's not used. I'd like to take a step away from the numbers and the graphs and just think, what does this mean in real life for real people? So I'd like to bring Mark in at this point, who's going to share his experiences of difficult to treat depression and TMS.
Hi everyone, it's nice to meet you all. I'm Mark and I suffered depression from my early teenage years. As I grew up, the depression slowly took almost everything from me. By the age of 30, I could no longer work in my job in aerospace or eventually even take care of myself. So I had to move back in with my parents. After 17 years of depression, I'd been on 14 different antidepressant medication combinations and years of private talk therapy. None of these treatments really had any effects, and my condition continued to worsen, but nobody ever suggested TMS or any other treatment beyond more drug combinations. I was still determined to find a way to get better, and so I attended a presentation by the medical director of Berrywood Hospital on TMS, who against the odds had managed to stand up a TMS centre for patients in the NHS in 2015. Given the failure of all the treatments so far over many years, I hoped that a different approach could be made available to me. But all the psychiatrists I dealt with had never heard of TMS, and they frequently said they wouldn't consider it because they'd never heard of colleagues referring for it, which I found worrying to hear about. I was told that since all of the TMS centres existed outside of the Integrated Care Board, that it couldn't be considered. I did access TMS in 2017. My parents saw my deteriorating state, and because there was something available, they paid for it. But not many people are in that kind of fortunate position. So the money went to Berrywood Hospital. This is an NHS hospital, not a private hospital. So the money stayed within the NHS, but it was just from a different pot going to a different pot, and that was the cause of the problems. I responded late into treatment, but they extended the treatment from the 20 to the 30 sessions. And amazingly, I made a full recovery. 3 months after treatment, I went from struggling to read just a few paragraphs to being in academic study, studying MSc bioinformatics, and I now have a career in scientific research. TMS typically requires patients to have top-up treatments, and I was the same. So after relocating from my new career, I tried to get TMS funded in the new place I was living, thinking I had quite a strong case now. Because it had worked, I only need to go to top-up treatments once every 3 months. But this still wasn't enough. And I was told every treatment needed to be exhausted under the Integrated Care Board, which could include triple combinations of antidepressants, and they all had to be tried first. So I asked the psychiatrist, would they see me relapse and mean that I could no longer work and lose my job before referring me to the NHS hospital where I was having the treatment. And they just restated their position on the triple combinations of antidepressants, since that was what was available. This really needs to change. So people on the call, If you can be part of helping patients like me get their lives back, really please do whatever you can.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's really compelling story, and yeah, it raises a lot of issues around awareness as well. It's not just about, you know, access, that some people in the profession just aren't aware of it and don't think of it in the way that it needs to be thought of. And we're going to explore some of these things a bit later. But I'd like to bring in Rebecca now, because Rebecca had a different experience of TMS, and I think it's an important reminder about being realistic, but it's still about giving hope to people with this extremely debilitating condition. So I'll hand over to you now, Rebecca.
Thank you, Douglas. So I only just managed to get here. Saturday through to yesterday, I was in crisis, but I am here. And I'm here to speak up for those whose crisis, whose pain may be relieved, even ended through TMS. Recurring crisis is a hallmark of my difficult to treat depression, which I will abbreviate to DTD at points. Stability is short-lived and hopelessness heavier and heavier. I revisit online a woodland burial site to ponder whether I have chosen the right tree to mark my grave. On better days, I'm cautious, easily overwhelmed, and acutely aware of my fragility. I am happiest alone in a meadow with my dogs hiding, I suppose. I didn't used to be like this. I was the life and soul of every party. Difficult to treat depression has robbed me of my career and professional identity. I'm now on benefits and remain open to a community mental health team, so I am expensive. But TMS saves money. If a patient's misery isn't enough to persuade you to invest in TMS, let it be money. People often liken depression to the black dog, usually Labrador looking, fat and old and sad and slow. Difficult to treat depression is not a dog. It's a wolf in dog's clothing. It is lean, predatory and savage. It mauls and it maims. Moving at lightning speed, it is neither slowed nor weakened by outdated offers of treatment as usual. In 2024, I catapulted into my worst ever relapse. Around 6 to 8 months in, I had TMS. I was desperate to try it. Nothing else was working. But my psychiatrist had never heard of TMS. It was me that suggested it. He facilitated an out-of-area referral as TMS is not provided in my home county, and my husband took unpaid time off from work 5 days a week for 5 weeks to get me to and from treatment sessions and to stay with me throughout. More than a carer, it is my husband who time and again keeps me safe. I am lucky that his role is taken for granted by services. I experienced no side effects from TMS, but sadly it didn't work for me, but I'm glad I tried it. No one with DTD believes that there is a magic cure or a panacea. All we want is the opportunity to be treated with evidence-based treatments that might ease our suffering. Only last week I listened to a TED Talk which challenged the effectiveness of SSRIs for everyone and reported on research about the positive effects of ketamine on DTD. The American researchers suggested that ketamine, with its ability to enable neuroplasticity, might be a good partner for neuromodulation. She was excited about how this combination of treatments might have a more lasting effect than ketamine alone. For her, in America, the positive effects of neuromodulation are a given. You'll remember that I don't expect a magic wand. I know that at times when the wolf retreats, in periods of remitting, if you like, it's important to do everything possible to build resilience. I follow the 5 ways to well-being. On better days, I try to notice and be grateful for the good things, however small. I do all the self-help. I walk my dogs in the fresh air, rain or shine. I swim, I volunteer, I connect with friends. I learn about trees and wildflowers, remain absent from alcohol and eat well. I do all the right things, and still the wolf approaches, teeth bared.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's very, moving evidence, which we need to incorporate into everything we do in the health service about depression. I just want to thank you again for your contribution.
Thank you, Douglas.
So let's bring this back to looking at some of the hard figures. So I'd like to bring in Richard now, who's going to talk us through the cost effectiveness case for TMS for difficult to treat depression.
Thank you very much. So just run through some numbers. So a course of TMS at the moment costs £1,192 per patient. This figure was worked out by my colleague, who's probably on the call, Ed Cox, who's a health economist. To put it in context, a course of CBT with a therapist in NHS talking therapy would be £800 for a course of treatment. ECT, which is widely available, despite having lots of memory problems and being is a very expensive treatment at £5,580. The cost of a TMS service is about £100,000 per year for each to run a machine 5 days a week, every single week. That's not a national holiday. TMS machines cost between £30,000 and £125,000. There are numerous ways in which these costs could be reduced if the will was there to do it. If you take all the care that is required for RTMS over an 18-month period, it costs £6,521. Note that other things like follow-up with professionals are quite expensive. Usual care for a case for a person with depression who doesn't have RTMS is at £5,940. These come directly from data we've collected in large-scale studies. Or if you take all work, care and NHS costs, RTMS costs £9,861 per patient, but the usual care costs £9,880 because TMS is more effective, so it gets people back to work. It means that they need less care themselves, they can provide more care to others. Because RTMS is twice as effective and allows people to go back to their usual life, as you've been hearing. In fact, all of those estimates are probably an underestimate because none of those include the cost of people on benefits who no longer need to be on benefits. In terms of what NICE, this confusing thing called an ISA, which I realize a lot of people on the call won't understand, but it's basically below the threshold that NICE says is required for an effective treatment from the public person society perspective. It is both more effective and it is cheaper. These are from British data from studies that we've done in Nottingham and other centres across the country. If you have doubts about it, then the same results have been found in Australia, Canada, Hungary, Japan, and the United States. Next slide. So this is a slide from a publication that we presented earlier this year. The things that make a big difference to the cost of theta burst is how long the treatment is, how many sessions you have, but most of all, and this is the most important thing, the throughput, how many people you actually treat. And one of the problems is that not only is this treatment only in 1 in 7 NHS trusts, but it's often poorly used. It's housed in the same unit as the ECT suite and is just not used very often. This needs to come out of the ECT suite. It's not appropriate to be there. It doesn't need to be there for any technical reason. It needs to be available so that people can go to their GP, receive this treatment and benefit from it without having to go to the community mental health team or mental health services. So next slide. So this is the pathway I would love to see, and I think it's justified by the evidence we already have. So in primary care, there are antidepressants and NHS talking therapies. There are GPs on the call. I'm sure they would tell you that they need more options and that it's very difficult to get the patients that they wished seen in secondary mental health care. There are forming now NHS treatment centres in the community, and the policy of the government is to move people from the hospital to the community. There is no reason why theta burst or TMS couldn't be in those treatment centres. You need a room, you need qualified people to deliver it, and that's all. You need a waiting area, perhaps. It could be used in crisis. It could be used for suicidality and depression. It works within 5 days. That's a lot faster than ECT. That's a lot faster than antidepressants. And the beauty of theta burst is that it could be delivered on the ward rather than transporting patients who need to be carefully observed because of the suicide risk. Where it does exist, it is used for treatment-resistant depression and outpatients, community mental health teams. And there it can be used for adults, it can be used for older people, it can be used for bipolar depression, it can be used for all kinds of comorbidities. There's a strong evidence or growing evidence that can also be used for children and young people from the age of 15 years up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's a really superb snapshot of where we are. And I think when we marry this with the evidence we've seen from individual patients, some of which we're getting in the chat, so thank you for sharing those experiences. It's hard to see any counter argument to this. We'd like to now move on to looking at the industry perspective, think about how we have to work in partnership with manufacturers to be able to deliver this. So Jake is now going to give us a quick overview of what he's learned from talking to the people who make TMS machines. Over to you, Jake.
Thanks, Douglas. Hello, everyone. I'm Jake Andrews. I'm Industry Engagement Manager for NIHR Mindtech Health Tech Research Centre. And as part of this programme of work, I spoke with 5 companies manufacturing and supplying TMS machines, some of whom were based in the UK and others abroad. Can I have the next slide, please? So many of the manufacturers that I spoke to had experienced disappointing sales and uptake of their products in the UK, particularly compared to other international markets, particularly the US. However, fortunately, manufacturers, including those based in the UK, are regularly supplying other markets. So if there was more demand in the UK, machines could be supplied quickly. All manufacturers were open to meeting with NHS trusts, integrated care boards, and other NHS partnerships to discuss new arrangements. Now, as we've heard, TMS is expensive and the machines themselves have a cost. The room they're delivered in incurs a cost, and the ongoing arrangement for staff to supply the treatment is also costly. However, as we've also heard, the data shows that on balance, TMS is cost effective, and there are ways that manufacturers can help to ensure this cost effectiveness. Could I have the next slide, please? So there are some key points that came from the interviews on what the manufacturers can offer alongside the supply of a machine, which I'd like to share. So first of all, the models for procuring or purchasing the TMS system could be differed. So there could be rental or lease models to reduce upfront costs, and several of the manufacturers I spoke to would be open to discussing these arrangements. There can also be discounts for bulk purchase across trusts or through larger regions, for example, through integrated care boards. As I've mentioned, supply can be arranged at short notice because the companies are manufacturing these machines on an ongoing basis for other markets. They can also offer an extended warranty and fast repair within 24 hours. So all of the manufacturers reported that they employ engineers who can very rapidly go to sites where there may be an issue with the machine and either fix it or replace it, and that parts or new machines can be sent out again within that 24-hour period. There's also the offer of regional training for clinicians on a semi-regular basis, because we know that there's a lot of turnover of staff in the NHS, and this might mean that those with the skills to deliver TMS are often moving on. But with the regular training that the manufacturers can provide on a regional basis, this could be overcome. So that's everything from me. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jake. So yeah, clearly the manufacturers are aware of the issues with some of the upfront costs. So it's very interesting to hear about these initiatives to be flexible and to help skill up the staff, as well as supporting different ways of financing the services. Thank you for your work. So how do we build this into a case? Because we all want the things to change and what do we take away from this session. So I'd like to bring in Mohammed, who's got a lot of experience of doing just that. He's going to talk us through his process for getting that business case out there. Over to you, Mo.
Thank you, Douglas, and thank you for all the speakers who spoke before me. So just a quick introduction. I'm a consultant psychiatrist in the NHS and also in the private sector. I started the first TMS service in the NHS in London, and it was the second in the country. Tony has referred to the Clinical TMS Society. I'm a past president of the Clinical TMS Society, and the Clinical TMS Society is an international medical society dedicated to TMS. Next slide, please. So I have to say before jumping into my slides that I'm really delighted to be taking part in this webinar today, especially after I heard the other speakers. And this is because of the highly respected colleagues I'm taking part with, and most importantly, people with lived experience with TMS. At the same time, I have to admit that I'm very disappointed and deeply disappointed that this webinar is actually taking place, especially in 2026. And this is because when I led the efforts to establish our first TMS clinic in the NHS in London 10 years ago, shortly after NICE approved TMS as a treatment for depression, I never imagined that 10 years down the line, we will still be having or holding such webinars and running such campaigns. If you think about it, we're having this webinar today because simply we have failed. We have failed as doctors, as mental health specialists, and as a healthcare system overall. We have failed to utilize a very evidence-based, safe and effective treatment that's addressing one of the most disabling disorders our society is battling with. And above all of this, we have failed our patients. I believe, and I think this will happen, that in the near future, failing to consider or offer TMS to appropriate patients with depression may be viewed as complacency and potentially even medical negligence. Part of this failure is because we as clinicians, we do not speak the language that the system and its managers speak when deciding whether to commission a new service or adopt a new technology. And this is why it's very important to be able to make a case and build a compelling TMS business case that speaks to both the hearts and minds of different stakeholders involved in the process and in the decision-making. Of course, there is no single way of doing it because we know our NHS trust can differ from across the country, but there's a framework that we need to work within. To start with, from my experience, so after starting this first TMS service in the NHS in London, the second in the country, I've been involved in helping a lot of trusts around the country to set their own TMS services. I've also helped other clinics and services internationally to do this. So I'm aware about the challenges. I'm not getting into this from a naive point of view. The framework in general, we need someone on the ground to champion this. And this usually need to be one or more consultant psychiatrists and work with other stakeholders in the trust and in the local area. To have a successful business case, there's a framework. The content might differ, but this is on the screen. You can see the headlines of any successful business case. You need to speak about an executive summary, something that does not exceed 1 page, the background, the strategic plan. You need also to address the risk and challenges in it. And above all, what Richard has alluded to in or discussed in details, the cost effectiveness and the financial model. This business case needs to be written in a language that not only doctors or scientists can understand, because you'll have people who will be taking vital decisions if this should be commissioned or not, and they're not medics and they don't have a scientific background. Of course, we will not be able to cover this in 5 or 10 minutes. I have a lecture that I usually give about how to build a business case. And if we would like to take this outside the meeting, anyone who would like me to help with this, I'm happy to do this completely free of charge, as long as it's in the NHS, because I think it's a shame that this is not available to all our patients in the NHS. Next slide, please. A pivotal part of the business case, if this will make sense financially or not. So let's just, this is, I don't have any background in finance. So this was the basis of the business case I presented to our trust about 11 years ago. And it's a very simple one. So any clinician can work on it. And I'll show you how to add the numbers and see if this will make financial sense for your local NHS trust or not. Imagine we've got this group of patients on the left, and there are 100 patients. Imagine they are 100%. and they will have TMS. So they will cost the NHS, every one of them will cost the NHS or the trust a certain amount of money that Richard has mentioned. And some of them will improve and some of them will not. We know that the most conservative figures will say that about 40% of patients having TMS will reach remission, and about 20% will have good improvement without reaching remission, and another 40% will not have any improvement at all. Of course, the protocols are now developing and advancing that we're trying to make more people respond and go into remission. So let's forget about the people who respond without going to remission. Let's imagine they're not going to respond at all. So we will end up with around 40% of people going into remission, and they can be discharged from secondary care, or they will stop using mental health services, and about 60% of patients will not respond at all. Next slide, please. While I'm diving deep into this, we need to remember that the benefits of using TMS is not only financial, because I'm just going very deep on the financial side here. Next slide, please. So we have here two figures that every local trust or local team need to work out. We need to work out how much is the financial saving we're making from group 2 going into remission, and how much it will cost us to treat group 1. Next slide, please. If we're able to establish that the financial saving from group 2 going to remission is higher than the financial cost of treating group 1, i.e. the saving that we are making for 40% of our patients going into remission is higher than the cost we have paid to treat 100 patients, then this business case, it stands financially. I'm happy to go into more details about this, but I know that we don't have time, but this was just like a tip or a very quick introduction on how to build a business case and how to the financial side that we as doctors usually struggle with significantly. It's not rocket science. Doing TMS is not difficult. It's just a little bit different from how we conduct business as usual as psychiatrists, and by some guidance from people who have done it before or an enthusiastic finance director in your trust, it's very easy and you can get it done. Next slide, please. I know that I'm one of the last speakers, and I know that everyone might be thinking where they're going to watch the match. Football was invented here in the UK. Similar to TMS, it was also invented in the UK. And hopefully it's coming home both for TMS and for the match tonight and in 5 days' time.
Well, thank you, Mo. That's brilliant. And thank you for your very generous offer of support in terms of developing the business cases. Of course, obviously, we might have to edit that last slide for use in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But I think we've got the editing tools, and AI can do amazing things. We expect Super John McGinn appearing on that slide at some point. Thank you so much. So what does TMS have for the future? What developments are on the horizon? And this is a technology that continues to develop. So I want to hand back to Paul, who's going to update us on what the future holds for TMS.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to touch on two things. So one is increasing the amount of benefit that patients can get from TMS. And the second is increasing the accessibility of TMS. And there are a range of promising ways to boost response to TMS, to make it work better for more people, to make it work faster. TMS treatment courses used to be just 10 sessions, but we now know that using 20 to 30 sessions improves response. TMS can be combined with other treatments, including medication, talking therapies, other types of neuromodulation to boost response. And we mapped out this literature in a recent review. Next slide. There's early evidence that a whole TMS treatment course could be condensed into 1 or 2 treatment days. This study on the right gave 20 treatments of TMS, each treatment just 3 minutes long, with 30-minute gaps in between treatments, completing treatment over the course of a day. They combined TMS with a single dose of a medication that boosts the brain's ability to respond to TMS, and found that despite only having 1 day of treatment, people's depression typically improved over the next few weeks, and many people remained well 6 months later. This is early evidence, though, and we're looking to confirm its potential with a UK-based clinical trial. Next slide. In terms of accessibility, we recently ran a survey of UK residents who have experienced mental health conditions. This survey was produced with lived experience experts in our Nottingham group. The most shocking finding was that 2/3 of respondents had never heard of TMS, despite it being recommended by NICE in 2015. We provided short videos illustrating what TMS is and discussing the experience and side effects. Respondents were typically positive about the idea of TMS. The most commonly expressed emotions towards it were interest and hope. Respondents identified some important points that should be addressed in the future to increase accessibility and help people with starting and completing treatment courses. In particular, respondents wanted more flexible treatment options and more availability in their local area and closer to general practice. Next slide. Particularly with these shorter treatment protocols, TMS could be offered away from hospital, in the community, in mobile clinics or local health hubs, potentially alongside other services such as employment advice, social prescribing, peer support, and sessions on staying well and relapse prevention. TMS could be a second-line treatment, with referrals direct from primary care if a patient does not benefit from one first-line treatment. A TMS service could see both patients under mental health teams and patients who do not otherwise need a mental health team straight from their GP, as follow-up of patients who have had TMS is no more complex than following someone up who has had a medication. By moving TMS earlier in the treatment pathway, we could intervene early to treat depression, get people better and back to their lives. Most importantly, we think people with the second most disabling condition in this country should be offered and be able to take up safe, well-studied, NICE recommended, cost-effective and potentially transformative treatment options. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That's a very powerful statement to finish the presentations on. I would like to thank all of our speakers for being very clear and focused. We've covered a lot of ground here, and we've done it ahead of time, which is an achievement in itself. I think there's a number of rallying cries that we can take from this session. And we're going to move on now to a short Q&A session, and then we're going to finish by giving Matt the last word from the lived experience perspective. So if you've got questions, please post them in the chat. I've taken out 3 questions from the pre-registration questionnaire that you filled out, and we'll deal with those first, and then if we have time, we'll go on to the questions in the chat. If panelists, if you're able to, and participants, if you're able to answer those questions directly in the chat, please do so. So my first question is, can this treatment be used in comorbid presentations, such as neurodiversity or dementia? And I think that question I'd like to put to you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Douglas. So to start with, if we're speaking about these comorbidities, and if TMS can be delivered to people who are depressed who have these comorbidities, yes, the evidence shows that having such comorbidities, such as ADHD, ASD, autism, or dementia, would not stop TMS from working as an antidepressant. There's a separate topic that there's some protocols, but it's not, the level of evidence is not as high at all as we speak about TMS as a treatment for depression. But there's some promising protocols for other conditions such as ADHD and dementia, but this is separate. We're speaking about using TMS to treat dementia without depression. One of the important points that TMS does not cause as a side effect any cognitive problems. So in contrary to ECT, which is a very effective treatment, but it can come with cognitive side effects, TMS does not cause these cognitive side effects. So the short answer, if someone has got ADHD, autism, and depression, and they have TMS, we should not expect them to respond less to the TMS in terms of the depression recovery.
Thank you, Mo. That's brilliant. So let's get on to thinking about accessibility. How can we get TMS more readily available to patients across the UK, for example, in primary care? Richard, I was going to put that question to you first of all.
Yeah, thank you. I think the evidence that is there. We need to get the people who say they want to increase accessibility for depression to transfer treatments from hospital to the community to act on that basis. So first of all, we have the problem of not just A lot of people, a lot of patients don't know about this, but we've heard repeatedly from our lived experience contributions that psychiatrists haven't heard of it or know very little about it. GPs don't know about it. Commissioners don't know about it. Disturbingly, the ministers of health don't know about it. So the first thing is we need to make sure people know that it exists. And the next thing is, I think it very much, we need to enable it to be used in primary care. I think primary care is able to offer a few things, but there's no reason why they couldn't offer this. We are working quite hard with not just manufacturers, but also regulators to simplify it and make it more available in a number of different ways. So everything is there. We just hope that at this time, when the current government wants to change the NHS, that it will listen and it will take note of evidence-based treatments. The one thing I would observe is that, if this was a cancer treatment, or if this was diabetes, or if this was stroke, there'd be no question about implementing the latest thing. But this has been waiting for 11 years to be implemented, and still there's no definite commitment to implement it. So why is there this double standard for mental health rather than physical health? Especially when the depression is one of the leading, if not the leading, reason that young people are not back in work or in education. So we apparently spend £25 on benefits and £1 on getting them well enough to be able to participate. Well, there is a health element to that as well, and this is one of the contributors to that.
Thank you, Richard. That kind of leads on quite nicely to the third question we have from pre-registration, and it picks up some of the remarks in the chat. The lesson from TMS appears to be that evidence is not enough, and there is clearly issues here around parity of esteem in mental health care. So, what's the most effective way we can build political pressure? How can we help with advocacy and get involved? What can we do? So I think that I'd like to start with you, Richard, because I know that you've been doing a lot of work in that area. Maybe you can outline what's happening, and then if other panelists might want to chip in.
Yeah, there are some colleagues on the call, Tim and Hamish from Newcastle, and myself. We've been trying very hard to interest governments. We've got a lot of engagement with some of the MPs, especially the Liberal Democrat MPs. We seem to have a little bit more engagement now with certainly the civil service that supports the government, but we're not sure about the government itself. Many of us have written, including Susan and myself, to MPs. We either get no response at all, or we get this stock response, which is really badly informed, which even cites us as... and if NICE approves it, well, why don't you know that NICE had already approved it? Or they seem to think that if NICE approved it, then it must be automatically put into practice, which isn't the case. So I think what we need to do is we need to put pressure, we need to repeat it, and we also need to accept that say to them, if you're going to give the same answer that you've given before, don't bother giving it because it's just wrong. And push, like Susan did for our own treatment, like Mark did. But people shouldn't have to do that. We need to do that, though, on behalf of all the people that can't do that. We need the major charities to really push for this as well. And they show some signs of getting behind it, but they could do more.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And yeah, the Made in Britain argument that Gabby's just put into the chat, I think that's got to be a strength here. You mentioned charities. It struck me in preparing for this project and doing my own research on TMS. I was on the Mind website, and there was no information about TMS on the Mind website. Do we need to get the message out through these organizations as well? And what can we do to make sure that they're aware of this message? Because governments listen to charities, thinking that the charities are the ones that represent public opinion in some way. Yeah, Mo, did you?
Yeah, I'll just
want to
add,
come in?
I totally agree with what Richard said, but I think also in the public eye and even among some politicians, there's some confusion about TMS and ECT. And I think we need to address this heads on. I believe ECT is a very effective treatment, but it's a way more invasive treatment. And we have lost the battle about ECT with the public. If you ask the layperson about ECT, they don't like it. They think very negative things about it. I think in order to get TMS to be accepted by the public and by politicians, we need to make it very clear that it's different from ECT, because it's actually very different from ECT. ECT will not be able to do anything after having the ECT session for the whole day. For TMS, we have people coming cycling or driving and they go back home cycling again. It's way less expensive. And as Paul has mentioned, more advanced protocols can now deliver it in a day or two. So I think part of it we need to address or try to see it from the eyes of other people. And when you speak to people who don't know about TMS and you mentioned TMS, even some doctors call it soft ECT, which is mind-boggling actually. Like, you know, it's very ignorant if people are calling it this way, and we have to name things this way. But I think we need to address this issue and explain to people it's different from ECT. There's no downtime. It's much more safer than even the usual medication GPs would prescribe.
So maybe one of the first things we can do is, and Andre's picked this up a lot because there's so much stigma associated with ECT. Maybe the charities need to be educated about that as well as the professions. So there's some really great points there. I'm wondering if this might be a good time to come to you, Matt, because you know, a lot of these topics came up in the interviews that we did for the videos that were recorded on the Mindtech website. So I wonder if, you know, would you like to pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. And it forms part of what I'm going to discuss as well. So I'm Matt, I'm bipolar and proud. I've been through the mill and out the other side, like lots of people on this call and lots of people in the UK and the world. But I'd like to discuss my experience in order to help this cause, spread the word and help other people. 10 years ago, after working at 100 miles an hour for the first 20 years of my professional working life, bringing up kids and trying to advance my career, I cracked and ended up being admitted to numerous psychiatric hospitals in the Merseyside region. First stint being 3 months, and then a year later, I crashed again and ended up in hospital for over 4 months. I was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder, and at the time, they told me I had treatment-resistant depression, as it was called way back then, with psychosis. And hearing the expression treatment-resistant depression to me, being hospitalized, meant there was no way forward, no way out, and no hope. I tried everything: antidepressants, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, talking therapies like CBT and CAT, and some helped a little, some not at all, and some made things worse. And nothing was getting me out of hospital this time. But then, a breakthrough, I was offered ECT. It was ECT that finally broke through. It rebooted my brain. I'm an IT project manager, so I have the right to use those expressions. It defragged it, and within 2 weeks, I started to feel relatively normal again. And after 3 weeks, I was allowed the home visits. And then after that, I had the weekend visit, and then I was discharged. Now, unfortunately, difficult to treat depression, as it's now called, it came back and it kept relapsing. And they said it's part of the bipolar cycle. It's expected. But to me, it doesn't have to be accepted. So when severe depression returned, I asked my community psychiatrist to give me another course of ECT. Whilst not unheard of, ECT was normally only offered to people that are hospitalized. And that scared me because I never want to go back into hospital. But then a glimmer of hope came through. My psychiatrist offered me something I'd never heard of before, and that was TMS. It was a game changer. I had a course of TMS that lasted 6 to 8 weeks. I stayed out of hospital, and in fact, I stayed in work. I could drive to the hospital, have my session for an hour or so, and drive home. And although the commitment at that time was 6 to 8 weeks for every working day of getting zapped, as I call it, it was a lifeline. I've had TMS multiple times now. I've had top-up TMS, theta-burst, PIP TMS, and it's always been in the community. No hospital admission and no crisis point was reached. So no losing months of my life through depression, Just walking into the clinic, being greeted by staff who knew me, sitting in the chair, and that feeling of a familiar tapping as the magnetic pulses hit my head was actually became a symbol of hope for me. So I know TMS doesn't cure bipolar, and nor does it cure depression. But in my opinion, it interrupts the cycle. It lifts me just enough to stop the spiral. It gives me back my ability to think, to function, and to maintain some sort of life. It allows me to stay in a loving marriage, and I've got loving daughters as well. And ultimately, it keeps me out of hospital and even allows me to stay in work. So because staying out of hospital isn't just a clinical outcome for me, it's being present in my marriage. It's being present in life. It gives me a life that feels stable, meaningful, and my own. And TMS has given me something I didn't have before, and that's a reliable way to manage bipolar depression when it comes too heavy. It has prevented relapse. It has prevented hospitalization. It gives me dignity, independence, and a future that feels possible. So the last word, I am one of the lucky ones that has been offered it and it being available to me in my region. So luck should not come into it. I share my story because lived experience matters. People like me and others on the call, people who have been through to the darkest places of mental illness can help others, and we can help others understand what treatments like TMS really mean. Not in theory, not in research, not in statistics, but in real life. In the life of someone who has been unwell, who has fought their way back and now stands here with the hope of being able to manage my condition well and share that with others. So I'm bipolar, I'm proud of surviving, proud of recovering, proud of using my experience to help others. I'm proud that TMS has helped me stay well, stay safe, and stay here. Without it, I might not even be here. So now I'm living the life I fought hard to rebuild. We need to get the word out there that TMS can bring, what it can do, and who it can help, because mental health matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's so powerful. And we deliberately wanted to give someone with lived experience the last word on this, because that's the most important evidence in this, is the transformative case. Andre, if you wouldn't mind just popping up the last slide for folk. We've had some questions about, okay, what next? What can we do? And it's really inspiring to see all these comments that people want to take this forward. So we've prepared some resources to help support those discussions. So on the Mindtech website, there's a page which contains short videos with patient experiences and some briefing documents that summarize the evidence. And there's a clinical briefing which you can use as a basis to go to thinking about developing clinical services. Check out the Mental Health YouTube channel and look out in your inbox next week, because we'll be sharing with you a recording of the webinar, and as well as a link to the Mindtech site. And we want this not to be the end of a very engaging and inspiring webinar, but the start of a genuine transformation of care for people who could benefit enormously. And society will benefit and individuals will benefit. Thank you all to a panel. These have been fabulous presentations, particularly people with lived experience for whom you're putting yourselves out there and you're bringing up thoughts and experiences that are very difficult. So we're all humbled by the contributions that you've brought today. We really hope that we can do that justice in what we do going forward. So keep an eye on your inboxes. Thanks for joining the webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing the next stage.